You're watching Bolton & Co here on Sky News. First-time mothers are being warned that their babies have a slightly higher risk of suffering complications if they opt for a home birth over one in hospital.
However, the figures show that it remains an equally safe option for women who have already had a child without any complications. Joining us is Dr. Carol Cooper, who's a GP and parenting author, and Rebecca Schiller, who is a doula who provides support for pregnant women through their labour. Rebecca, let's start just by explaining a little bit more about what a doula does.
Well, we're really there to provide emotional and practical support to a woman and her partner during pregnancy. We attend the birth with them, and then we're there afterwards to help them in the postnatal period as they adjust to their new lives.
So how many home births would you be involved in?
Well, I think over half of the couples that I work with are opting for a home birth. Some of those home births transfer in during labour and some change their plans in advance, but certainly a good proportion of the numbers I'm working with are opting for home births.
Dr. Carol Cooper, if a first-time mother came to you and said she was considering a home birth, what would your advice be?
I'd give her my honest opinion that a normal birth is a diagnosis you can only make after the event, and it's very difficult to know, especially if you're having your first baby, how it will go for you. And I think I would discourage her, whilst of course realising that the choice is ultimately hers.
Because a lot of mothers would say, well, I'm not sick, I'm pregnant, why should I have to go to a hospital? And of course concerns about the risk of infection, of MRSA, and being in an unnatural environment.
Well, there's a very good reason for that. And pregnancy is a natural state. You're not a patient. Pregnancy is a normal life-affirming condition, but there are really good reasons why human births are not a piece of cake. We have a bigger brain and therefore a bigger skull than other species, and yet a woman's pelvis has not quite evolved to the right size, and you have to expect birth to be, shall we say, a little uncomfortable. It's also a little bit dangerous, and whilst I appreciate that care needs to be woman-centred as it now increasingly is, I think we forget that 10-centimetre journey down the birth canal for that baby is the most dangerous journey you ever make in your life.
Rebecca Schiller, would you encourage first-time mothers to have babies at home?
I don't think I'd encourage anybody to do anything. What I'd be very keen to do is point them to what we have now, which is some really good and thorough research, which gives them...
But if they said to you, I want to have the baby at home, would you say, well, actually, you know, I'm not a doctor, but the medical advice may be to go the other way?
Certainly not. I think having read the study, it says that giving birth in England is a very safe thing to do, and that even with this very, very small increased risk for first-time mothers at home, giving birth at home for a first-time mother is still a safe option, and it is the only option of the three types of birth that were studied that gives 90% of mothers the chance of having a normal vaginal delivery without the additional risks, both physically and mentally, of the kind of interventions like caesarean sections and forceps, which can have ramifications across a woman's life.
So fewer medical interventions with home births and shorter recovery times, I suppose, are the benefits.
Well, there is a danger, of course, of having an intervention if you're giving birth in hospital, and occasionally, of course, there's a risk of having it because it's needed, and that's it. And if you're going to select out the kind of women that aren't going to need any intervention at all, then clearly your statistics are going to show that you don't have any interventions at home. In fact, typically a woman labouring and running into problems is transferred to hospital.
I mean, one obstetrician this week said to me, if there are more home births, we're going to have more babies dying.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Do you think that?
I don't think I'm qualified to say that, but certainly I think this research does not demonstrate that. I think this research demonstrates that we need to understand more about this very small increase in risk, because we are currently offering 90% of women obstetric-led care. Over 40% of those women will have interventions that they do not want. They have an option which is the lowest cost to the NHS to have their babies at home, and while I appreciate that there is this small increase in risk, we perhaps need to look at the fact that the NHS currently isn't very well set up in lots of areas for home births.
Well, I was going to ask, do we have the midwife provision? And given the fact that there are relatively few home births in this day and age, are midwives experienced enough?
Well, a few midwives are experienced enough, and they will take on and they will revel in taking on some home births. But clearly it's not for everyone, and if you take out the high-risk women and they agree that they're not going to have a home birth, then you're actually left with usually just quite a few. And then when we look at them in the light of this report, for example, you see that a lot of them are having to be transferred to hospital. Certainly first-timers who opt for a home birth are needing to be transferred because of an emergency. So, you know, I think that kind of cancels out the reason for having a home birth in the first place, the comfort, the familiarity, and so on that women enjoy when they can get it.
Is that your experience? Do you come across a lot of transfers?
We do come across transfers, and I think the study shows that happens in somewhere around a third of cases for first-time mothers. Interestingly, they go to great lengths in the study to say that the vast majority of those transfers are for non-emergency reasons, such as the mother changing her mind, wishing to have more pain relief. I do think, though, that it's worth saying that this study looked at low-risk women, and it factored in the fact that some women started off at home and transferred into hospital. So those 10% of people that are having that are having interventions from a home birth, those aren't people that have, you know, changed their minds during the course of labour. These are people that had planned to have their babies at home, may have transferred in, may have stayed at home. The study comprises the whole of that group. So even if you transfer in, you still only have a 10% chance of those having those interventions.
Okay, Rebecca Schiller, Dr. Carol Cooper, thank you.